thank you for joining me today, Berry, for this episode of the podcast. The second time you've been on the Automate Construction podcast. This time we're live, which is nice. We got 4K video, and I want to talk a little bit about the stuff we've been doing over the past couple of weeks while I've been here, and maybe some of the future projects going on in at CyBe around the world. Mm-hmm. So I guess, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Got my COVID shot yesterday.
You did?
So feeling all better. No, we're extremely busy at this moment. Within actually all the teams, whether it is design and engineering of the machinery as well as building projects we're working on, or whether it is printing and manufacturing. So at this moment we're also searching for new team members in order to facilitate the further growth that we are currently facing at our company. So all good.
Yeah, cool. So you guys let me train on the CyBe system. It was a great experience. The first day I was here, I was able to see you guys printing with Mark and Joop and Alwyn, and you guys worked. The team was working really seamlessly together. They made it look pretty easy. It wasn't super difficult, but definitely when I started doing it myself, it was more complex than they made it seem.
True, but in the end it's about getting the feeling, and if you got the feeling right after a couple of days, it's like learning by doing, but really it is, you need to do it in order to understand what happens when you do something, and based on that, gaining experience, you improve your skills.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't hard. Like, I wouldn't say it's something that is unachievable. I think almost anybody would be able to practice with the system, mm-hmm. and over time develop the skill set and the feel. A lot of it is very subtle, like sounds that could come from the mixer that Mark is able to recognize in a second, that seem like benign to mm-hmm. other people. So what's the next steps in the short term?
The next steps in the short term. At this moment we're making several printers, which we will be delivering from off August, September, October. Some of them will be new models, which we haven't shown yet. We will show them in September, October. We'll announce what these models are, what the advantages are of these new models. Of course, we also have our software updates. There will be a release of the new Shizzle, I believe, somewhere in August. And for the rest, we are adding a lot of content to the library. So the digital platform on which we provide the remote training, as we couldn't travel due to Corona, due to COVID. So here we've got Academy, models can be downloaded, software updates can be downloaded and installed on printers, as well as the knowledge base with all the practical and handful tips and tricks. For example, how to hoist printed elements, how to reinforce them, etc. So a lot of content gathering, adding.
Cool, and that will benefit all of the customers, partners that you've...
Yeah, at this moment, since the travel restrictions that we faced throughout the last year and a couple of months are now more relaxing, so we are scheduling in. Of course, the team went a couple of weeks ago to Qatar. We see that now more countries are opening up, so we are scheduling those trips to our partners in Morocco, in Paraguay, in Curacao as well. And there it's about printing, not only training them, although at this moment they're being trained remotely. It's about having the last assessment, and then during that 1 or 2 weeks being there with our team, also helping them with building the first buildings, so that they know how to not only print but to build a real building with the technology.
What are some of the key differences of just a regular print and building a real building? It's like within building a real building, printing is printing, that's the same. The only difference that could be is that you print the wall elements directly on site, which means, and that is possible with these robotic arms, you print a wall element next to another wall element, and then you print in an angle. Mm-hmm. Of course, if you look at the print itself, it's quite similar from a printing perspective, but from a detailing perspective, you need to take more things into account.
For example, a wall element, the connection with the window, with the roof, with the flooring. And that during design and engineering already by our team or by the team of our partner needs to be figured out. And here on the knowledge base, actually, we've got similar of those principal details, which you can download or they can use as reference so that they don't need to reinvent the wheel themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. Would you expect most partners to go through this and really read every detail of the instructions?
No, I don't think that they are going to read, and nobody's doing actually, because we can measure this, reading everything and then start printing. No, they've got a situation on hand, and then they need some specific information, and then they will go whether that specific information can be found.
Yeah.
And that's also relevant because within after sales, Mark, for example, we've got within the service level agreement those bi-weekly meetings, conference calls, and we get a lot of feedback from our customers, feedback on how the software runs, artisan, and with that feedback, these are also input for our design engineering team, our robotic and software engineers, to further improve the technology. And that's relevant that we have now in multiple countries all around the world, different universities, companies that are really using the technology that provides really relevant information to further improve the technology.
Yeah, it's an interesting system you have. I always go back and forth on, and there really is no great answer to like, what's the best printing system, because they're all so different and they all offer so many different
It depends
benefits.
on what kind of project you're going to build, as well as where, what kind of regulations, etc.
I used to think like the gantry system is what you want to do if you want to build something big, but then I realized that all the gantry system prints I've seen have cracking in them, and especially in seismic zones, a monolithic structure really just isn't an option. And so having that big all-at-once print really becomes far less appealing, especially if you want to avoid a static cracking or you want to print in a seismic zone. Are there any other benefits particularly that really differentiate the robotic arm systems from gantry style systems?
What we always look is to determine to get a fast return of investment. And we see, based on different calculations, we make these, we call it the Economic Institute of Construction of Building. So we make a comparison of how you conventionally build a house. For example, this is a house, so let's say somewhere in the world. They build it conventionally with bricks. Costing is around 45,000 euros in the end. Based on that, these are the direct building costs. We compare with what if we would print such a building, only the direct building costs. So that means the overhead are not included. And then with printing it, we see that there is a cost reduction of around 2%. However, conventional construction takes 25 weeks. Printing, also due to the fast hydration time, 24 hours, you can schedule all your other activities the day after, instead of waiting 28 days, which you normally do with bricks or with concrete. The production time is not 25 weeks, but 5 weeks, which means the 2% of cost reduction that we calculated here with such a mobile concrete printer will be increased to around 7% overall reduction compared with conventional construction. So that's a relevant one. This is possible because of within our system, you've got a really quick setup time. If the printer is on site, just within a couple of minutes you can start printing. This is within a gantry system more complicated, especially when you've got a really big gantry system. It takes like longer than half a day to set it up. And then depending on the material and the mixed pump system you use, with our system, if you're a good and skilled operator, it takes like one bucket of waste and you're started up, which takes you like 5 minutes, and then you're good to go to print. Depending on the material and the mixed pump system you use, it can take maybe 1 hour or even longer to get the print trials. Since our system is so standardized, you win a lot of time in this regard. So besides cost reduction, also instead of building one building in 25 weeks, now you can do so within 5 weeks, which means in the end, with one printer, you can produce more buildings. So your turnover could grow.
And if you're done 20 weeks earlier, you're collecting an extra 4 months of rent, 5 months of rent,
etc., etc. Indeed. So we mainly focus on this, and then we can conclude, because we did that with our current printer as well as with different kind of houses, and also comparing a gantry system and a robotic system in some of those cases. And we saw that with depending on the size of the building and the shape as well as the size, either a gantry system could be more interesting, or a mobile robotic system. And that is what we first do with our clients: determine what do you want to build, how big is your market size, so how many units in the upcoming years might you be able to build, and based on that determine which printer, this printer and the RC, what would be the benefits.
One thing I haven't seen yet is well, I guess first, another benefit I saw of the robotic arm systems versus the gantry style systems is the setup and takedown time. A gantry system needs to be shipped in modular units, and then you need either a crane or forklift on site to put all the pieces in place. And so, especially for on-site printing, that setup cost and takedown cost is pretty expensive for the gantry system versus robotic arm, which could potentially just be driven off the back of a truck.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't yet seen any two-story houses printed with a robotic arm system, and I guess that's largely due to the limited height range of a robotic arm. There are some planned projects like the Milestone projects. They have the 5 houses built. They built the first one, and they have 2 more coming up soon that are 2 stories. And so
next year they hope, and that goes. They print with a robotic system on a track. So pre-casted, I think for these robotic systems, you indeed would focus on printing and pre-casted, whether this being pre-casting the elements on a job site or off-site, and then eventually assembling all the elements, which means you don't need a really big printer. You just print with such a printer, robotic arm, super fast, depending on the material you use, and then on site you're just assembling all the elements into the building. At this moment, also with our partners overseas, we see that they are focusing on a 2- and 3-story building by assembling the wall elements eventually into a building. And then whether it is a 2, 3, 4, 5-story building doesn't matter anymore. The best thing is that you still can use the same printer, the same robotic arms, same hardware, same software. Within the gantry system, you're limited within the reach. Or if you have got a big gantry system, if you're going to precast big walls, it's pretty big hurdle to ship them to the job site, because you're constrained from a logistical perspective with the weight that a truck can take.
Under that circumstance, would you be able to pour concrete columns for the structural element, or use steel for a 2-floor structure?
What we always focus on, and we do this since 2017, the project we've built first in Dubai, in order to comply with local regulations, use an RC frame. So within the printed wall element, 1 column, maybe 2, depending on the regulations, with concrete and with reinforcement, and then of course also a beam, which can be either concrete or wood. Of course, also you can, instead of an RC frame, you can use steel beams or steel frame structures. Mm-hmm. The best thing about that is that it directly complies with the local regulations. It is standardized, so every municipality can approve, can permit such a construction project. So printing can be, from a practical essence, can be done. You don't need any new standards, etc. The downside is that actually you've got a double structure. You've got, especially when you've got a 4-layer wall system, and you've got the printed wall element as well as a column. So it's a very extra strong structure, which means in the future there are possibilities to, if you could standardize, make the printed wall elements load bearing, then actually can get rid of the steel framing or the RC's frames, which means you would downside the cost even more. So that means now you reduce the cost, the direct cost, by 2%. And depending on the design of the house, our in-house designed patio bungalow, a cost reduction of 5.5%. And then overall with time, you decrease the cost with more than 10%. If you in this setup would also make sure that the wall principles would be low bearing, so the printed walls, you could reduce the amount of RC framing, which means the cost reduction, which is already there, would be even bigger. And then you could reach 15% of cost reduction.
Yeah, one of the many ways that more cost reduction can be achieved with concrete printing is so new that there's like so many hurdles that can be overcome that could reduce prices even further, whether it's teaching people more or...
Right, the printing, concrete printing as well as automation in construction, this just got started. Of course, there are a lot of also other companies, almost unicorn companies that just quit, like Catera a couple of weeks ago, and really, I think a great example. They focus too much on increasing their productivity, setting up a lot of factories, but if in the end there is no local customer that wants to, that you can provide such a house, then eventually you've invested a lot, in this case $2 billion, and they got bankrupt. So what we focus on is getting such a return on investment calculation, determining where the first clients will be, and then based on natural growth, first your first house with your first printer, then with that first printer, second house, third house, and then slowly they will grow. And then over time, in 1 or 2 years, our partner could purchase a second printer, and then eventually a third one. And then based on that, the community that we are creating, global community, which is like in most of the countries at this moment, where you see here an orange dot, within the white dots we're currently in negotiation with to set up partnerships and to sell the printers. Based on that, eventually they're going to strengthen each other, they're going to share through the library their knowledge. For example, at this moment, our Japanese partner Aizawa, they put these toilet rooms that they printed last year, they put that on the library. You printed one of the wall elements last week. At this moment, our partner in Morocco, they're printing in Morocco 10 of those. And so they're sharing this, which means they are reducing the cost for having the need for an architect, which is not even included already in this 5 to 10% cost reduction for building, but also here there is a solution for reducing cost for design and engineering. This will speed up time, and this is something we can do because we're working together with a group of not only the bigger companies, like for example Saporti Palungi in India or Bouygues in France, or Acciona in Spain, but also the smaller companies, even startups like Wafé that you met last week, he's actually a startup, and based on that we can strengthen each other.
So you mentioned how the current printed walls, and this goes for every 3D printed construction company, the printed walls, as strong as they are, even stronger than traditional concrete in many cases, aren't recognized yet by engineers as being structural components of the building. So what are the hurdles to overcoming that? And is it an amount of money? Like how much would it take to reach that certification?
Certification, of course, always money, and the more countries that you want to include, the more money as well as time you need to spend, a lot of discussions. But also from a technical perspective, there is a hurdle because if you only have concrete, there is no ductility in it. So what is necessary is to find out a way to integrate ductility. So when it cracks, then that the reinforcement in it still is holding it together. You can develop that as a material, but then the question is how are you going to build it up with such a machine? Because then the printer needs to integrate directly reinforcement. And in some places you want to have it, and in some places not. And if you only have a system that can place reinforcement everywhere, that means that in the end you've got a wall element that is low bearing, ductile, standardized, but since you're placing reinforcement, which is special reinforcement everywhere, it will be fucking expensive. So there is no return on investment anymore. So there are like a lot of factors, variables that you need to touch. It should be practical for such a machine. You need to develop technology, you need to test and certify it, you need to still make a business case out of it that it is faster and cheaper. Also the material that you're going to use needs to be locally available, because if we develop a new kind of reinforcement that is only available in the Netherlands, I don't think that Buffet in New Zealand is going to say, yeah, I'm going to import it. The price will go up. So there are a lot of variables, factors that are relevant in order to make to determine whether something is from an economic and a technical perspective feasible.
What about just getting it to be recognized as a similar strength to like a cinder block wall with rebar placed in and concrete poured?
Yeah, it could be in some countries, but then you copy actually what is already being done, and then you need to look at the specific material costing of like limestone bricks or the concrete, and then concrete we use normally, which is our concrete as well as the other companies, they're normally a bit more expensive than regular concrete, and then from a costing perspective you won't be cheaper than regular brick walls.
So I guess the crux of my question is, how many units would somebody need to build for it to make sense for them to pursue these certifications to get the material recognized as being structural, get the printed walls to be recognized as structural?
How many things need to be printed? I don't know whether it is a matter of how many things in order to determine the return of investment and now we can invest in it. I think also still because it's quite complex, there are a lot of variables that need to be right in order to say this is the solution, which is a solution not only for us at CyBe but for all the partners or other companies from a global perspective. It's quite complex, so I think first the right solutions still need to be found.
And it's regional?
Yeah, it could be that indeed in every region that might be different. And after that solution is being found, then it can be determined what would it cost and how long will it take and who do we need to work together with in order to develop this. We have not found yet the way that during printing we're going to place a kind of a reinforcement. From a technical perspective, we've done this. We've done several testing, demonstrations, prototyping, but in the end, we said, yeah, if we want to scale up this prototype, from an economic perspective, it doesn't make sense. So we stopped and we said we go for an RC frame, for example, that we've done in Dubai and Saudi Arabia, etc.
Okay, so we discussed a lot in the first podcast how CyBe is a self-financed organization. You guys didn't take on external investors and you operate completely independently without having to succumb to other people's demands, or so that adds a lot of freedoms for CyBe. Can you talk about, since you're the sole person kind of responsible for CyBe's well-being and future, I'm sure there have been moments that maybe stressful is the wrong word, but high pressure moments.
There have been many stressful moments indeed.
So what were some of can you talk about any of the moments where you were really like pulling your hair out, like what's going on with this startup? Should I continue? Like now you guys have sold a bunch of printers, you're much more comfortable, but
now we're pretty comfortable, and if now somebody says this project we put it on hold for 1 year due to financial reasons as a result of COVID, then okay, fuck, that's a shame. But then we will talk again in 1 year, and we are capable, we're big enough, strong enough as a company to overcome such things. But back in 2015, when we in 2013 or 14 was about a focus on developing the technology, material together with Corridor, and then the hardware and software, mixed pump system, the robotic systems, software to control it. Based on that, we entered into 2015 in an accelerated program, and that was actually a thing that I personally learned a lot, because they said it's not about your technology, that people don't give a shit about the technology, and what they want is something else. What is the solution? What is their problem, and how could your technology solve this? So based on that, I've learned in the end, people don't want to have printers or whatever, they want to have houses or a bridge or a product that they can use. So I think I've been lucky in 2015 to enter in this accelerated program, and they made it mandatory to contact over 100 potential customers of which 50 should be outside the Netherlands, so in France, in Germany, but also in Japan, in Australia, etc. And based on that, we validated whether our thoughts were correct. As a result, we also entered in the first partnerships. So you, in a pretty safe environment, grow. Then in 2016, we acquired a project in Dubai. Then actually it started to get a bit more complicated. Because then you're not anymore here safe with my father's company in the Netherlands, with all the people that you know, the same language you speak, the same culture you have. Of course, I've been in Dubai a couple of times beforehand. But when we were there, we could print here, it's like 20 degrees. There it was like 40, 45 degrees. Some things were not prepared, different mentality, people that work there. And then you are there pretty far away from home. Back then we had sometimes those moments, how are we going to survive this? 2017. And then of course also something about payments. That first project, the general contractor, not the most faithful, trustworthy contractor, we still have not been paid full. But I believe in the technology, I believe what we're doing, we pay this up front. We will make sure that back in 2017, the first on-site printed building that is actually being permitted by a local government so that it complies with local standards. That was back then not done. For us, I believe that is relevant to do, although there are a lot of hurdles, challenges, and we will overcome them, because afterwards you need to have such a reference. And we learned a lot. Afterwards we did a similar project in Milan, which was a bit more easy, of course, but also we've done afterwards a project in Saudi Arabia, the first house being built in Saudi Arabia. And we thought Dubai, Saudi Arabia quite similar, but we've learned that actually a lot of things are different, and we again went through an entire process of negotiation, etc. So those 2 years, and mainly from payment perspective, and you have got then like 5 to 15 employees in 2017, 18, and that was the most challenging time, that you don't know when the money comes in, so you don't know when and how to pay your team members, and what do you need to do to get new sales. That was pretty stressful. I think afterwards, at this moment especially, since also we've been in such stressful times, and currently, as well as last year with COVID, we were pretty well, and no stress. We knew what we could expect. Of course, it's not only about printing; it's eventually setting up a company, how to structure your company. With sales, design, engineering, contract management, printing, manufacturing of printers, design and engineering, hardware, software, ICT, finance, PR, HR. Together you can address all the current topics on an operational level or even on a technical strategic level. So we're pretty good organized as a company at this moment, which means if there is something like a crisis as COVID, then we have our meetings, we address it, and then together as a team, so I don't feel that alone, but together with the team, I think we can solve or address any situation that will come to us.
So from that low point, was there, I'm sure it wasn't just like that low and then bounce back the next day because they weren't really paying on time, and so that's like creating an extended kind of struggle. Was there a moment where you came out of that rut? Can that be defined in one moment? Or?
2017 was, as a result thereof, pretty stressful the entire year. Then we were lucky that we started to sell printers. Of course, we had to learn a lot of new things, because instead of only printing and design and engineering a building, a lot of new activities. Yeah, we could build a printer that we use ourselves. But now we had to develop a printer with manuals, with training, making sure that we could connect it so that we could log in from a distance and control it for servers and support. So we needed to step up our game actually. That is something we had to do while we, with another team, were printing in Milan. So we created 2 streams, the printers and building, within the company. although we had from the last year, 2017, still the bad situation for a construction company that was not paying. Then eventually the Saudi Arabia project, we were there, but they reorganized within that department, which means they said, okay, get rid of all your equipment, clean it up, and we had to negotiate that we would build it again together with our partner, in this case CCC, and we pay up front. And we were lucky with CCC as a partner in this project to do this. Then eventually in September we finished that project, printing it in 5 days. I don't know whether it's actually here. This one. Printing this in 5 days in September. When we flew back, then actually our printer would be also in that airplane, being transported back, because we had to print in December 2019 the Vergaderfabriek, the building that we've built as a general contractor here in the Netherlands in Apeldoorn. But then we got a phone call from the Ministry of Housing that like, yeah, in November we do a big inauguration. We have kept your printer here in Saudi Arabia. So I could call everyone like, yeah, we need to cancel some projects because our technology is still there. That all until the beginning of 2019 had a bad impact on our company or from a financial perspective, and that means that from off 2019 we had to overcome that. So make sure that by the end of 2019 we run break even. We've been lucky that we focused a lot of time on sales, new deals, new partnerships. As a result thereof, we had a pretty good order portfolio the beginning of 2020, and then COVID came in.
You mentioned your printer was stuck in Saudi. You were talking really fast though. Was that because of shipping delays, or they were holding it hostage?
No, not hostage. They didn't communicate it with us that it was their idea to also have an inauguration in November, December, and we were back, and we learned about that, and then indeed at customs the printer could not leave.
Because they wanted it on display.
They wanted it on display, and they got us back, and they said, okay, we understand that you need to cancel some projects, but we will pay additionally for that to balance everything.
And CCC is an independent construction company or government affiliated?
No, CCC is, I think they're in the top 50 biggest construction companies globally. They are located, they're mainly building throughout the Middle East. And one of the guys we worked with was actually Stefan Mansour, who is now in America, in the States, focusing on standards for 3D printing, 3D printing and construction. So he was also involved in the project.
What was his role then?
He was innovation and knowledge manager, and managing the project together with Patek and Ziad. Ziad was the local project manager, and they were working from out of Greece. Their main office is located in Athens.
Cool. The project in the Netherlands, how far is that from here?
Almost 1 hour and 15 minutes driving.
Cool. And what was the general sentiment of the surrounding town? Were they excited about it?
It's actually not in the town itself. It's near an airfield, so there is a lot of
industrial zone.
No, farmer land around
agricultural.
It. And it's a meeting factory next to, so it's being rented by other companies to have their meetings over there. It's all round and printed elements. We tested the elements in order to get it approved based on structural design testing, because in here actually there is no RC, so no reinforced concrete or no steel beams. Therefore, we needed to use this standard, which is can be used in Europe. If there are no standards, because you're using something new, then with this one, you can actually, and it prescribes, you need to build up the entire structure. You need to calculate it as a structural engineer, and then test it, and it should be with a big safety factor strong enough. So in here in our facility, we build up we simulated the ground floor. printed the wall element, connected it only in the bottom, and then the beam structure of the roof, and then tested it.
And the remains are still sitting over there?
Yeah, indeed. One of the remains, the floor and the bottom, is still standing there. We tested it, so on different forces, back and forth and up, so that it would be low bearing. And this was possible because within the building we create the architect and structural engineer, they used a dome shape, and then you can use a compressive strength of concrete. After testing, it was strong enough, and then with those test results, you can attach them within your construction submission. And then a municipality can provide a construction permit.
So, offhand, do you know around how many elements that building was made up of?
14.
And were they all unique, or were any of them the same?
They were all the same, like this one. The principle different. The wall principle, the 4-layer system, that is the same, but then every wall element was unique, a bit smaller, a bit bigger. I don't know where I've got.
So did you have to print 14 test units, or did you just have to
No,
print?
just one, because the principle was all the same. In every wall element, we only had to test once. And actually, if we would use this principle in another project, we can use these results because it's tested once, okay? But eventually the wall elements, they were all different. But the principle was like 4-layer system. The first inside, and then the first, the second and the third layer, that is structural principle. The last layer is for the outside, so you can use a different shape to have a different aesthetics to the building. And that is what we used. So the structural principle was all the same. Outside, and I think you've been there last days, Project Milestone is being based on the same principles. And because actually the structural engineer that we hired for this project, they did the structure calculation for Project Milestone, so same.
Do you know what company that is?
With the Veen Bos.
Okay, cool.
Which, together with the University of Eindhoven, Van Wijnen, the BAM, with the Berry Hendriks, we started together with them that research at the University of Eindhoven, which took like 4 years. And then out of that, we did our stuff, and the BAM and with the Berry Hendriks, they started a printing factory.
Would you say Van Wijnen is leading in structural design engineering certifications?
But they have a lot of experience. I don't know whether they are leading. On a global perspective, a lot of things are happening. It's not only, there were two things in being leading. Where you're located, maybe they're leading in Singapore, for example, they've got an office there, but not in Paraguay. So that's your region, as well as how well are you in developing your technology or your skill set. So it's the region as well as the skill set. They've got a lot of good projects being done together with the BAM, with Van Wijnen, with Berry Hendriks, also making nice developments in Singapore, we see.
Cool. So has there been a high point in your experience leading CyBe? Best day?
Best day.
I know you're not publicly traded, but was there maybe a day where if you were, the stock price would have shot up, where the value...
I actually never thought of it.
Not one particular day necessarily.
About the value of CyBe, I don't know. About when we felt pretty amazing, for example, the last day of printing in Dubai, or the last day of printing in Saudi Arabia. These are days, or Las Vegas in France. These are days that the team that is there, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, they are. It's quite amazing if you print a building, which is not a lot of buildings globally seeing. Are being printed, especially then printing it in these locations. Like 2019, we printed in Sharjah. That's like you can count on one hand how many buildings are printed in the UAE. We've done 2. So that's pretty amazing, and that we can do this and then still deliver such a project with the team we have.
What kind of companies get the most value from buying a concrete printer? Is it companies that are already doing a lot of precast, or companies that are just building a bunch of units, struggling to find labor?
And when would it be most beneficial? I think it's not. I don't think you can say that this type of company for them it's most beneficial. There is a demand in housing, in benches, etc. And the company that, whether it is big or small, a precast factory or a construction company, if they focus and they've got a network with those customers, whether it is a municipality or a housing corporation, if they can provide with their using their technology elements or in the entire building to address that demand, they will be most successful. So having a good relation is relevant, and of course what we've done last year in November in New Zealand, during the training we also did some public demonstrations. What we see is that out of those public demonstrations, a lot of people from New Zealand, from Hamilton and Vancouver, they now know his company. So they're contacting him with, hey, can you print this? We've got a project here in this, etc., etc. As a result, he is now growing as a company. I think that mentality, how he's done it, is most relevant. And what you see is that normally the smaller companies, they act and they organize themselves like this. The bigger companies, for example with Bouygues, they're more organized, so with them we are more on a strategic tactical level, determining what applications are there, making the cost comparisons, also testing some things from a tactical perspective, and then see how we can move forward. These are more longer procedures, because you've got to do with a big company. If you make a cost indication together with one of the directors, in order to get his approval, he needs to discuss this internally with other people.
That's the real beauty of CyBe being self-funded, and like you guys don't have to run through so many hoops to make decisions. You can kind of pivot quickly and push down there.
That is also something that is really relevant as a company in the construction industry. If we go up somewhere.
That's a good point. Most construction companies.
It's not about being funded. We can be flexible. That is also during the accelerated program. Those mentors, they said focus on one thing. Everyone says this. Focus on only selling printers, or only going to print, or only, and that's actually what you see with all the other printing companies. Cobalt is selling printers, X3 is printing themselves, Bet Abraham wants to sell printers, etc., etc., etc. I think in the end, that is what is separating us from all the other ones. Since we are doing everything, also we can create a crossover. We know how to build printers and design and engineer them. Based on that, with the architects, we can determine what can we print, etc. And we can push the boundaries in the technology as well as in the designs. And that is, I think, unique, but also setting us apart. And in the end, being that one-stop shop, being able to support potential customers in a better way.
Which is the most important thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's about crossovers. What we see is we are using the fourth industrial revolution technologies, which is a step ahead of the second and the third industrial revolution, which is now taking place in the construction industry normally, using BIM, etc. So normal construction companies, they're growing, and then they need to step to another one, which means a lot of social education, so social innovation. What we focus on as a company, we focus on technical innovation, which is not only printing or robotics or big data or Internet of Things, or it's like everything together and making the best combination.
Were there any skills you needed to develop that you weren't expecting to need when you embarked on this journey? As the founder of CyBe?
It's also on the back of my shirt, learning by doing, but it's like a lifelong of learning. In the beginning I coded a bit myself. Now we've got teams I hired in the beginning also, I did some coding myself. I thought, okay, this is complicated, so I hired an external party to purchase the first robotic arm. He had software, as well as with a mechanical engineer for supporting with the mixed pump system. You've got eventually the feeling, but you hire a lot of people around you in the team. In this case, we hired external companies to support with the development of the first setup of the system. Robotic arm printing such a wall in 2 hours. It all started with a small welding arm, which only did this, and to look whether we could place one layer on top of another layer, which was like November 2013.
Mm-hmm.
November 2013, December 2014. And then we said, okay, we enter in this accelerated program because this as a prototype we could use. We said this will be our business. We are going to use the technology to build houses. Eventually we learned in the accelerated program that it's better to sell the technology and to address issues. For example, one of the biggest issues is the labor shortage. Research has been done, for example, by Boston Consultancy Group back in 2014, that we can determine what the labor population will be in 18 years because they will be born today. Welfare is increasing, amount of products is increasing, etc. So there will be a shortage in every country they can determine. And I will always say this shortage will be even bigger in the construction industry because people nowadays, they don't want to be a carpenter or whatever. They want to be a Bitcoin trader, an influencer, do marketing, etc., etc. So this labor shortage for the construction industry will be even bigger. So construction automation, whether it is concrete printing or robots placing bricks or whatever, eventually will be a solution for this. Because although there is a big labor shortage, still the population globally is growing, which actually is a strange contradiction. As a result, the housing issue gets bigger. We need more houses. We've had a collaboration with Indonesia, which is now due to COVID on hold for the time being. But in Indonesia, there is a shortage of over 10 million houses today.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, we think in the Netherlands, we've got 1 million houses needed in the upcoming years. That's already a big issue. There are countries which are even having bigger issues. So automation is for them really interesting. Because and that's also why we are mainly in countries like here in the middle, as well as Paraguay, Chile, in those countries here and around the Caribbean, because there they currently use technologies in construction which are low in the mid-tech. So they leapfrog. They can think of, okay, we're going to invest money in setting up a precast factory, which costs them 10, 20, 30 million euros. It takes like 4 to 5 years to build it. Or they say, now we're going to invest in one printer, 200,000 euros. So the investment is way lower. That printer will be available within 4 to 6 months, and then we can start printing. And then in a natural way, we're going to grow our capacity of printers as well as the production capacity. So they're leapfrogging, and that is what is happening now.
Right now, your production, I saw a little bit of, is mostly handmade. Each printer is done by your team. They make sure all the wires are in place properly and everything. What scale of printers sold per year do you think you'd have to reach to rethink your production process and maybe even automate some of the production process?
Last year we started, instead of doing everything ourselves with the team, to start outsourcing components. And within that process we can still grow for the upcoming years, depending on the demand.
While keeping overhead low.
Yeah. So based on that, we've got a core team, and they're assembling everything as well as putting in the electrical wiring as well as hydraulics, putting in the software. These are relevant things. Other things like welding, we are lucky here in the Netherlands, in our village, Os. We are in an industrial area where you can find a lot of other companies that are really specialized in welding all these parts. So why having all the machinery, the people, etc., ourselves? If sometimes you've got 4 printers to be being manufactured, and then 0, and then 2, and then you want to have continuity in that regard, that would be better. But since we don't have it, it's better for us to outsource to companies that work for other companies, making, for example, the crowler or parts of the mixed pump system. And then we do all design and engineering. So we do all design engineering, we provide these companies to which we outsource those parts, these designs, then we order these parts and they can make it. And then we get them here after 4 to 8, maybe 12 weeks, depending on the component. And then we need like 2, 3, 4 weeks to assemble everything. Assemble the robot on the crowler with the tracks, attach the mixed pump system, depending on the options, connect everything with data, test it here, and then ship it out.
Some people have a concern with any new technology. It's like, why not wait a couple of years and get the new model? What if the one I buy now goes obsolete? Is there any answer to that?
What we do is with our systems that they're all modular. So in the future, if ABB would have a new robotic system, new robotic arm, then the robotic arm can be replaced. We develop software and always update it. We also provide our customers, we push the new software updates, we push them to the printers, and then for mixed pump system, that's also modular, as well as the robotic arms, as well as for the crowler.
So will hardware upgrades always be available for people to retrofit their old printers?
Upgrades as well as updates. It's a modular system, so it's easy to take off, for example, the nozzle and to add a new nozzle or to add a new feature. That's something we create at the platform, and depending on the need, some customers they say I don't want to use the material you use with Corridor. It's from a logistical perspective, it's too big of a hurdle to ship it or to create it locally because we don't have the resources. We're going to use this. Okay, then we can adjust the mixed pump system in order to also be able to process that.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I had a misconception that CyBe printers were required to use CyBe material, but that's not the case.
No, that's not the case. Of course, with all the other things we provide, with the models, etc., this all has been tested, these wall elements, with the material we have with Corridor. If you have a different material, then your structural calculations will be different, maybe, as well as your printing strategy, what you can print. So it might be that these designs you're not capable to print with your material. So you will end up by reinventing a lot of things we already have done. Mm-hmm. But I think we should not make it mandatory for a customer, for a partner, for a user of technology that it should be this. They are free, and maybe they will learn in the end that with our material, with a Kudo material, it's the best. But then it's still their decision, it will be their experience. And maybe they will find a new material, and then of course we want to test it so that we also have a feeling of how it works, and also to make sure that the system is capable of processing that material.
So with your material, what's the maximum overhang that you achieved?
The maximum overhang that we achieved. It's a layer of 4 centimeters. Normally it's like 25%. Mm-hmm. So we can overhang 1 centimeter, but then also you've got gravity, because if you only have one layer, and then you've got an overhang of like from one layer of 4 centimeters, 1 centimeter each, and eventually after 4 layers it will tip down. So you need the second or third layer for counterweight. So that depends. In Dubai we had an element which in the bottom was 30 centimeters or 35, and in the top it was 850. So it was pretty much a pretty big overhang, as well as in the vergaderfabriek. These walls had a pretty big overhang. But first going in, and then because it was a double curved wall, and then in the bottom it was bigger than in the top. So also we created, and that's important in order to create an overhang, you need some stability somewhere. And that is the nice thing with printing, you can create somewhere stability in order to keep a pretty big curved wall standing.
How far away are we from housing on demand? When people can say, I want this house built in this region, and they can quickly get a quote from a contractor to deliver.
Yeah, you also mean from printing?
Yeah, certainly.
No, because otherwise I would say no, that's already being done, but not with printing. Aren't companies like Icon or Mighty Buildings offering this already in the US?
Kind of, not really. It's still, they're kind of picking and choosing the projects they want to do, and Mighty Buildings, it's hard to truly define them as a 3D printed construction company when it seems only a small portion of the building is printed. You don't really see, I mean, from the projects I've seen of theirs, it's like less than 5% of the visible parts of the building are printed. Mm-hmm. So excluding them, there's no companies that are accepting orders, giving kind of like a flat price on their website or something like that, where someone can just go through an automated process, click buy now.
I think that's very also complicated.
Yeah. Because
of all the variables there are around the world.
Yeah.
Different kind of costings, different kind of market economics, but also different ways of building and different types of housing that people want. Somewhere they want to have 40 square meter houses, single bedroom, and in some places they want to have 250 square villas with at least, etc., etc. A lot of these things also depend on the welfare in such a country, as well as what is normal from a cultural perspective. And from a climate perspective, do people live outside or inside? Is it rainy, is it cold, etc.? So only from that perspective, there are so many variables that determine this, that it is really difficult to start working on such a thing. That you say, platform, we try to learn a lot, making these costings with all the partners we have, and that's also a good starting point with these partners to first determine what kind of buildings they make, and then create a costing together from a conventional way, as well as combining it and comparing it with concrete printing. But such a platform for global housing on demand. Cobalt, what is it? It's also something on demand.
I don't think they're. They do building on demand is the name of the BODE system.
Yeah, indeed.
But
they should do this.
They also, I think, pick and choose their projects. They aren't able to say yes to every single project, and they don't have any kind of like flat rate. But I don't mean, you can never have really a global flat rate. Even just a regional print on demand system would certainly require a printer in your area. You're not going to ship all the way from Europe to America for just one.
A nice example who is actually doing this, but not within the construction industry, is 3D Hubs. Do you know the platform? If you've got a 3D printer, and then you can add it to the platform, and if you are a person that has a 3D file that needs to be printed, then you can go to the platform and say, I have got this file, and where is the most nearby printer or printing facilitator? Yeah. And then you can select them, you can review them, etc. You can select them, and then you share your 3D file to them, and then a day, 2 days, whatever, and later you can pick it up. And
so I guess let me redefine my question to how many years are we away from something like that for concrete printing?
That we need a lot of money. And a lot of investments, and with 3D Hubs, what they have for plastic and all other materials except for concrete housing, they started in Amsterdam, also back in, I don't know, 2014, 2015. They went into a lot of investments, but it's really easy because there were so many, that's also relevant, so many plastic printers back then. 2015, everyone bought like their first Ultimaker order. So there was a lot of, and they were figuring out, okay, now I've got my Ultimaker, but I'm not going to print a cup for myself and that's it. So there were a lot of people that could provide that service. And eventually a lot of other people, they thought, oh, this is interesting, so they combined that. I think for construction is way more complicated because you don't have that mass of printers. Of course, you've got the demand; people want houses.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a person will go on his telephone and say, "I'm here. This is my." There are a lot of. In order to build, you need a permit. You need a mortgage. You need ground, etc. So. In order to have such a platform, there are still a lot of other hurdles that a person that can order a printed house, he needs to overtake. And a lot of houses we see are also being built not by people privately, but by companies, by organizations. And I don't think that they eventually will use such a platform, because what they do is, construction is pretty much being built up on relations. The relation that a construction company or real estate company has with the local municipality, with the local government, etc. There it will be arranged how and what some things will be built. That's maybe also the reason that Catera, they focused on production. They had production capacity in the US, in I think somewhere in the Netherlands as well as in Asia. Spent 2 billion, but they didn't focus on sales. And then they started to focus on sales, and they came to a conclusion that they, as a corporate, as a big company, it's really difficult to enter into a more local market. And that is also something we experienced when we were talking with potential customers, like also with Wafé. We had a podcast last week with him, that they know the local market, and I think that's relevant. And that will, in that regard, construction. Such a platform that's really thinking 4.0, construction 4.0. But a lot of people, like in a lot of countries, they're still here, also how they purchase a house. So that takes 5, 10, 15 years.
It's fair. A big problem, like you mentioned, is the supply and demand. A lot of people want even not just houses, but furniture, planters, benches, these kind of features. To make the supply match the demand, obviously you need to sell a lot of printers, or you can have them available for rent. How far are we away from a system that allows people to just rent a printer from some equipment manufacturer, the way you can rent a crane or some other piece of equipment?
A lot of companies currently, they ask us as well, we want to have a printer, but we don't want to purchase it. Okay, sure, but I'm not going to give it for free. And then they ask us, can you lease it? Can we lease it? We've tried this back in 2014, that we would lease out the printers. But then the leasing agency we talked with, they said, yeah, but then you produce a printer, it will be here ready, like maybe tens of it, you lease them out, but you lease them out to countries like in the US, in South America, in wherever. Within a leasing contract, for them normally it is mandatory that they can, because it's being leased, if then the company that is leasing is not paying, then they normally are capable of getting back their stuff. But if the printers are like, not in the Netherlands, but all around, in Africa or whatever, they cannot do this. So the Dutch leasing agencies, they're not interested in leasing things out. So what we always say is, okay, we can lease them out, but you need to organize locally your own leasing contract. And then what we see is, in a lot of countries, that is a hurdle. Finances is currently a big issue, as well as a result of COVID. A lot of companies, of course also us, it's about struggling. Yeah.
But forget you guys leasing them out yourself, because that's obviously like a huge capital expenditure, and like, I don't know if you want to become an equipment rental company. It's like so many headaches with like dealing with repos and all that other stuff. Yeah. But I pictured more as the existing rental companies adding construction printers to the list of the products that they have available for rent, like alongside excavators and cranes and.
True, possible they could do so, but then I believe that they will only do this when there is a demand for these printers. And since the demand is still too small, because the construction industry is here and we're providing technology that is here, and there is still this big gap, knowledge gap, demand gap of the need for such a system. In the printing industry, with other companies, we're really at educating, informing other companies Gaining credibility. I think that is the current stage that we are in as 3D concrete printing companies. Together with universities doing a lot of research. There are a lot of opportunities to do research, but also further developing the technology. And then slowly that will grow. It's like Tesla, their first car. They started the company in 2003.
I think I've heard of them.
Yeah. They first focused on the Tesla Roadster, which was an electrical car being built based on I think a Lotus. Right. And before they got mainstream with their current models, it took them like 10 years or even longer. So there is still within, and you're selling just a car or just a car. Within construction, there are a lot of also other things that need to be organized. And then construction is very regional. In every country they build differently. So a bit more hurdles, I believe, because of the fragmented industry.
Yeah, I'm probably biased because I'm like gotten so deep into the space of 3D printed construction that I feel like there's a lot of people wanting to rent the equipment. So I feel like demand almost is there now. I mean, maybe if enough people watching my channel want to rent it, we can like get deposits together and then buy a printer and then they can have their allotted time slots or something with it. But I think there really is. But
then before you are going to print, because if you look at the process, there are two flows, information and materials. In order to be able to print and to use the building, you need to have an architect that can design a building and that is printable. You need a structural engineer that can make the structural calculations in order to indicate that it is safe. That is printable, but also safe with the local context, so local regulations. They need a contractor that can build all the other stuff, windows, doors, and create the connections. So a lot of things you need to think of. Then indeed you need a printing company, but also the materials. So a lot of things, it's easy to have a printer and say, now I'm going to print, but still, then you have a printer and you're enthusiastic and you want to print. But still you need to arrange a lot of other stuff. We have done this since 2013. And since we have this holistic view with our own team of architects, structural engineers, we can support in any kind. And I think also that sets us apart. At this moment, Kevin, we're now, besides looking also with Kudo in other materials, also making sure that material is being produced locally with local aggregates, super relevant. So we are supporting, in this case, Wafé in New Zealand, with a local New Zealand CyBe mortar. And this is something we're doing in other places. So that the person or the company that is purchasing a printer from us, they can focus on one thing which is for them most important, sales, so that they are going to print. And we can support with all the other stuff. So if you have renting a printer, then it's not only about the printer. And that's why I think those renting agencies, companies, they can do this, but still, I think they need to provide a lot of other information before a company is capable and being enabled to print.
Yeah, especially the big rental companies. I mean, maybe there's capacity for them to rent out one printer, but are they interested in that?
Normally what they are renting out are cranes, these kind of things. And they know that people are being certified. They know that
very risk averse.
Right, and they know that it can be a Caterpillar, it can be a Liebherr, it can be a lot of other brands. So the market is way more mature already. And then for them it is safe to step in. And that is at this moment the concrete printing industry. We started back in 2013. I think before we had like 1996 up. Berry Hendriks, Enrico Dini from Italy, Winsome and Labro University. Winsome as a company, but Labro University, Enrico Dini, and as an inventor, and Berry Hendriks first as research. Then somewhere around 2010, 11, 12, the first companies, Winsome, ourselves, Henry Rudenko, Pat Abram started as a company. That's like not even 10 years ago. So at the early age of concrete printing, then afterwards a lot of companies came in, some successful, some not, some less, some more. But the industry is still getting more major, and I think that first will need to be done in the upcoming 10 years before we can start talking about those platforms, renting, etc., etc. And the question is also whether these kind of things, like such a leasing agency, would come in, because that is pretty much old industry, current industry. The question is, do we also need this in the construction 4.0 industry?
Generally, I agree, but the one thing a rental agency would provide is accessibility, and then it would speed up the adoption process if more people are learning about the printer, doing more projects in more areas. It could accelerate things, but is it too early? Maybe you're accelerating at like a short-term loss or something like that. Not CyBe, but like the contractors who are using the technology. Or I guess it's a question of pace.
Yeah, and maybe in the future it will, that there is, depending on the region, there is such a leasing agency, renting agency, and some regions not. So I also think different ways, different models in order to facilitate the capacity of, because it's about capacity of printing.
Yeah, so to pull away from business stuff for a minute, I know one of your personal interests is running. You have a running event that you've been training for coming up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I started running when I was like 25. My father did back then the New York Marathon, and I was pretty amazed about a marathon, 42 kilometers and a bit. So I did the marathon back then in Barcelona, and now since Corona came up, when the time was stressful in Saudi Arabia and Dubai, that was not that good for my health from a sporting perspective. You don't have a rhythm, so it's not eating well, it's stressful, not sleeping well, etc. Now, as a result of COVID, I'm at home here in the Netherlands for like 1 year now. Beforehand, I was only traveling. I was more outside the Netherlands than in the Netherlands. And since I started running the marathons, like the one in Barcelona, also did back with my father in 2017 the New York Marathon and some half marathons, I always was triggered by the Marathon des Sables. Which is a 260 kilometer marathon through the desert of Morocco. And that is still on the bucket list. I'm 33, so I realize that if I'm not going to focus on that now, and I'm 40, which is just within 7 years, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. And then it might be that I'm going to regret that decision. So Corona came in, you've got way more free time in lockdown, so you had to be at home, gyms were closed, etc. Then actually we saw that there was also a half marathon of 120 kilometers just within 4 days, 30 kilometers the first day, 60 kilometers the second day. Third day is rest day, and then the last day 30 kilometers again. So yeah, that came up. We said, yeah, we've got the time, and still it was January, and traveling is still a bit of difficult. We don't know when to get the shot, the vaccination. So this event will go on because it's in the desert, so you can have a distance. So we're going to subscribe and we're going to start training. And actually, it started like that.
And so the actual race, what does that look like? How many days? What's the...
4 days, 30 kilometers, 60 kilometers, rest day, which will be my birthday over there, and then 30 kilometers. And the best thing is also, and that's also with back to business, in 2018 I was the most promising entrepreneur here in the region. And then there was a speech in a bar a couple of days before where you needed to present yourself together with some other competitors, and then you needed to bring something. And I brought my shoes, which were running shoes, those 5 fingers, because I run on barefooted with those 5 finger shoes. That's actually a nice example for me, because what we are doing also with CyBe, it's not a sprint. It's not that I want to within 10 years get a big investment and then I'm out. It's not about the money. What I'm doing with CyBe, what we're doing, it's more like a marathon. Within a marathon, sometimes you're sprinting, sometimes you're walking, but it's an endurance thing. I think for that you need to be very aware during running what you're eating, you're resting, etc., etc. And that's quite similar as being an entrepreneur at the age that we have, like late 20s, beginning of 30s. We are still working until we are 60, 70, or whatever. So what we're doing is for the long run, for the long term. And then it's trying within, because I've done some marathons and this is like an ultra marathon. That's also sometimes what we're always trying within CyBe. I started here back in 2013-14. It's quite small. We focus on developing the technology, and what we are adding every year is something new. And that is also with running. Okay, running a marathon, a normal one, okay, I can do. Running it barefooted, I can do. And now it's like the next step, which would be this. Yeah. So for me, running and scheduling that training, etc., building everything up is quite similar to managing a company.
The one challenging difference I could imagine would be, at least in a marathon, you're always stepping forward. Whereas like in a company, you can run into problems like the permitting didn't work out the way you expect, or you don't get paid for the project, and then it's like somebody picked you up on your marathon and drove you back 10 kilometers.
True, but during your training, which takes like months, sometimes you scheduled, and now I'm going to run, but actually you feel something in your calf or something, and then you need to decide for the better not to run that day, which is actually step back.
Good, you fixed the analogy.
So still the same. You really need to listen to your body, physically but also mentally, if you're going to train and run. But for a company, that's actually the same. Developing our technology, of course, we've got a roadmap. We, as CyBe, with our team, we want to be there, which means a lot of discussions monthly, every quarter, with the team captains, with the team members. But also really important, in 2015 they've learned me that validation with your partners, with your potential customers. So at this moment, since our printers running at this moment in Morocco, in New Zealand, in Japan, for example, in those bi-weekly meetings, we want to know what they're printing, how it went, and what are their, what's their feedback. Maybe we should add this in artisan within an option, because then for them it would work better. Based on that input, we develop the technology further.
Can you talk a little bit about the Netherlands and kind of like the mindset and culture in this country? I've noticed it's quite different from some of the other countries in Europe I've been to.
Really? Oh. What was the difference?
In some ways, the people seem maybe a little bit warmer, more open, and I've heard a lot of people describing a love for freedom that I thought was proprietary to America.
In the other countries, in Europe, I think everyone has got the need for freedom everywhere. But I think that in all places, freedom means a bit maybe something else. They value it differently, but also within a country, you see that in countries you've got the far right, and they value freedom in a different way than the more liberal people. Yeah, I think that of course within all these countries we also see that there are cultural differences. There are some books like the Cultural Map. Yeah, we deal with that. Also within our team, we've got people from Ecuador, from Greece, and we had people from Latvia, from New York, from India. We've learned that in communication, and as you are getting older, you become more aware, and then you know how to deal with these. But sometimes you get arguments about these things. Of course, it's learning by doing, and yeah.
So what makes the Netherlands such a hotspot for a lot of startups and a lot of companies that have started in the Netherlands and grown, and now they're multi-billion-dollar companies operating out of the Netherlands?
Are there so many companies?
Unilever.
Yeah, but that's like a company that's existing like ages. No, but the Netherlands is a pretty dense country with 17 million people, pretty well educated, and from the earlier years, it always has been export, which means also relevant. We're English, the language we understand pretty well, so that's relevant to communicate. with other countries outside the Netherlands. But since the mentality of exporting, the Netherlands is a small country, so if we really want to grow, we need to go outside the Netherlands. I think that's relevant. And then within the Netherlands, we've got a pretty smart industry for mechanical engineering, for robotics. And since we are here in Os, within just 1 hour, we're in Amsterdam, which is the capital. Within 1 hour, we are in Rotterdam, so it's pretty close by. And if I'm going to Amsterdam, I'm crossing a lot of other cities in which a lot of other smart people are living, good, well-educated, skillful people, which are needed to create something, for example, what we are doing. Plus, what is also relevant, I think, that we've got a pretty good social system, if you compare it with some other areas. So we're pretty fortunate to say to live in the Netherlands. It's a pretty good climate.
Yeah, I agree. And so, how has the mentality of people in the Netherlands found its way into CyBe? What ways has, particularly being in the Netherlands, affected CyBe?
Sorry, what do you mean exactly?
So, are there any qualities that, from the culture of the Netherlands, that have found their way into CyBe? I'm sure there are some, but are there any that you can like pinpoint?
Cultural aspects that are common in the Netherlands. We're pretty hands-on, and not a lot of bullshitting, pretty direct, and I think that mentality, like also, I'm lucky to have already been in Dubai before I had the project over there, but just going there, say what is necessary, do your shit, not a lot of talking, deliver the project, solve everything, that mentality. I think that's relevant in order to, especially in 2017, 18, 19, to sell the printers, but also build projects in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. I think that's really relevant. And I also see that with the team members, those people, they like to work at CyBe because then they go to Qatar, they go to Paraguay, they see other countries, they meet with other people.
Cool, I think that's a pretty good answer.
Yeah.
Are there, you mentioned there's some parts of your product like the mixer pump system, the crawler, that you're considering outsourcing to other companies to speed up the production time and kind of reduce the necessary overhead at CyBe. What other things are you considering outsourcing or looking for partners to help you develop? Like, is there something in particular that you wish a business could come in and say, hey, we have this great solution for this?
No, for example, the library, the academy, we do based on the EduNext platform. So that's normally being used for massive open online courses.
Mm-hmm.
Is it somewhere? Course operator.
Games coming soon.
Yeah, Open Hendriks. So we work with them. Probably they don't know because we're just a small company for them. But we're using these applications, for example, with the models. We're using the ShapeDiver platform. So we're working also with these companies, or we're working with them, we're using their services or products. Like when I mentioned, we are combining a lot of other technologies in order to create our own, the CyBe technology, which is the right combination of different other technologies, applications, materials, etc. Like the steam locomotive, that one of the innovations was indeed the steam engine, but a lot of other innovations, and then combined together, created that system. I think that is something with concrete printing quite similar. Or concrete printing, if you look at these tools, yeah, in the end this is being printed, but this entire library can also be used for limestone brick houses or whatever.
Are there any big milestones you would like to reach this year, and then also say 5 or 10 years from now?
Big milestones. No, yeah. Of course, we want to keep on growing. And what is for us important is that our customers, now that COVID is slowly getting away, people get vaccinated, that they start really building. They've got some plans for the end of this year, but I would like to see that they have got afterwards more and more projects. We see that there are a lot of issues, global housing shortage, material, labor, skilled labor. So the goal that I have maybe in the future is to set up a CyBe Foundation, and the CyBe Foundation should address education. So provide the CyBe Academy some basic education just for free, as well as housing, to look how can we address that. Because not everyone is fortunately to have a roof above their head. So what I would like to do with the community that we have, to see how we can do also good things in that aspect. That will be a milestone. I don't know whether that will be this year, next year, or in 5 years, but we are working on that. And then the best thing is that since we are working with such a community, we can strengthen each other. And then also with the partners that we have, they're in it for the long run. So based on the monthly or the weekly discussions we have, we notice that we've got quite similar values. Also in the first meetings we have with new customers, it's about, of course we talk about business, but it's also to have a feeling whether such a person, a family, or a company, they've got the same values, because then we can in a good way work together, and eventually are being capable of strengthening each other. We them, they us, as well as the community each other. And that would be nice if in the future we can, in this global community, can do more good, and because solely one company in New Zealand, one company in Australia, we are just small. But if we are all together, we can have a bigger impact, and then we can maybe change or address a lot of issues that we're at this moment facing. But in the near future, those issues will only become bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Are there any kinds of project requests you get that are just right off the bat, obviously a bad project that you would recommend the client pursue other methods to achieve?
For example, a company comes to us, can you build this? And we know that for a fact, no, you can better use limestone bricks, or yeah, we've got a lot of offers, but maybe that's us because we didn't inform them well, and because we've got projects in the Middle East, in other places, as reference, that companies in South America or in America itself, in the US, that people come to us, can you build this house for us? Yeah, we can, but then we need to travel from the Netherlands to with a printer in an airplane, with then normally when we would build, we would be a bit cheaper, but with all those transport travel costs, it will be like twice as expensive. So we've got a lot of these requests. But I think that's due to the fact that we need to educate, we need to inform people that we do this because from an economic perspective this makes sense, and we do not do this because it's not cheaper or faster in the end.
How do you see your role as a leader evolving as CyBe grows over the next decade?
I see myself as a leader.
Your role, so your responsibilities and your...
Yeah, you get more responsibilities. What I'm trying to do, whether it is a leader or it's about living, and I think for everyone, and then they need to figure out themselves how they structure this in their life. But I worked at my father's company when I was like 23, 24, 25, and then I started CyBe, and then it was about you can take over the company. But I knew that then I needed to work for like 10 to 15 years underneath my father in Os nearby, so I knew, okay, then this will be my world. I studied at the university, I did some research projects in Hong Kong for things in Hong Kong, designing a vertical zoo in Buenos Aires. And then I was like, maybe working at my father's company, taking it over, it's not the thing I'm meant to do or I want to do for the rest of my life, because then I know for in the upcoming 20 to 30 years what is going to happen. So I started to think, what is actually important when I'm 60, 70, 80 and I look back at my life. And then I want to have fun. I want to do amazing stuff which other people didn't do or were able to accomplish. I want to stay happy because I can have fun to go to a bar every evening and get a lot of beer, etc. That's a lot of fun now, tomorrow, next week. But on the long run, it wouldn't make me happy. So you need to balance the fun stuff with stay happy with the good stuff and live long, having a healthy life, running a long marathon. I don't know how healthy that actually is, but you need to focus and be aware of things. And then life is like step by step, and from there I will see. So focusing on this, everyone should do this on from their own perspective, and then for the rest, I'm not going to determine I'm going to be this leader or that leader. It's like walking. I always say, just make the first step, and then start worrying about the second step. If you already start worrying about step 3, but you're still with step 1, then you will fall. So that also makes a lot of things more easy, because I'm not worrying about 3 years, 5 years or whatever. First I need to survive or make sure that by the end of this year we have achieved our goals. That by the end of this year we have delivered those printers, that maybe we move to another office place, that and then we will see, based on that new fundament, what the milestones of this year, what we are going to build afterwards. What will be 2021, we know what the goals are, what will be 2022, based on the new normal.
Great, well I think that's a great place to close off. If somebody wants to pursue a project with you or buy a printer, how should they reach out?
They can go to our website. Of course, they can contact me on LinkedIn. A lot of people are doing that, and then I'm always say, please get our contact form on our website. Fill in the information, where, your company name, surname, last name, etc. Your details, what you would like us to print, having the specifications of the printers, or that you want to purchase one. And then eventually either the sales team, which is at this moment a team of 6 people, or the info team will get back to you as soon as possible.
Make sure to include a lot of details, because so many people reach out asking they have false expectations, they want a $10,000 house or something. If you can do the best you can to demonstrate you're a serious customer, maybe with some construction experience, or you know what you're getting into, not expecting a $10,000 house, that would probably go a long way in getting a good reply back from someone.
Yeah, otherwise they will get a reply like a $10,000 house, that's not possible.
Middle finger emoji.
Yeah, that's like really small, but only the material of concrete, like the structure, already that's quite easy, 10,000. Of course, it depends on the location. There are regions here, the direct building costs are around 45,000 euros. But no, really a 10,000 house being printed, they will only indicate that price for the material.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sitting with me today and doing this podcast. I think people will really appreciate the value you offered in this conversation.